Alright guys, so in the last video I tried to explain to you how important this particular steps can be, and one of the signs that it's important is what you see on your screen. This stepper motor driver, A4988 driver, burnt up while I was working with it, and this is not even because I wired it wrongly. It was just because I wired something else wrongly, and that something else that I wired wrongly caused this particular damage for this. So these sets of videos, these particular ones, especially about the electronics, they are very sensitive ones, and this is where you have to calm down and really look at what you're doing properly, because if you are going to be spending money over and over and over again in this particular project, this is where you're going to run into trouble. These electronic parts, all of these boards are boards that I've wasted in my course of the experiment, and it doesn't matter how good you think you are, if you get these wrong, you're going to run into problems. So, and that's why I had to cover this separately. Now you're going to need an A4988 stepper motor driver before you can hook up your printer effectively. What are stepper motor drivers? These are the things that help you to be able to control your stepper motors, right? You will not be able to control this stepper motor if you don't have this thing. So, and it sold for dirt cheap, to be honest. It's not very expensive. I think in my country it's sold for like 5k or 4,000 naira. It's not very expensive. But you see, if you burn 10 of these, that's 40,000 naira. You burn 100 of these, that's 400k. So you see, it's not exactly cheap like that. So keep that in mind. So now, the most important thing you want to look out for is how you connect them to the board, right? You can just follow my procedure here. You'll see that this particular stepper driver has two of this clip. It has a potentiometer, and then it also has this particular, what do we call this now? Maybe capacitor or something. Always make sure that your motor is set capacitor side towards this blue part. You see that all of my stepper motor drivers are all facing the same direction, right? So if you look at this particular thing here, this one right here, you can see that it's closer to this blue thing, right? It's not the other way around. In other words, it's facing this way, not like this. So if I tell you that, that should work. If you have your ramps facing like this, you want to make sure that your stepper motor drivers are facing like this as well, right? So that's one easy way for you to do it. That's a very quick explanation. But there's a more complex one, and I'm going to quickly go into it. You see, all these stepper motor drivers actually have what they do. If you look at this particular end, it says EN, right? This word EN there is the enable pin of your stepper motor driver. And also you see here, it says the DIR pin, and then it says step next to it. So the DIR pin is the direction pin. And towards the left here, you also have the ground pin. So the ground pin also is kind of like the one that really carries the power, right? So the ground pin matters a lot. So if you put all of these things into your consideration, you see that if you look at your ramps, all these pins also are there, right? So if you look at this side, I see it's DIR there, then step next, and then you see GND pin as the last part on that side. So that corresponds with the direction we said you should put this thing, right? So once all you want to do is match pin for pin in the particular slot they have assigned for these things, right? So as long as you have direction on your stepper motor driver facing direction on your ramps 1.4, you're good to go. All you just need to do is press it in, and then it goes in, and you do the same thing for every other of these particular slots. So this particular slot is where your Z axis will go, right? This particular slot is where your Z axis will go. Forget that they wrote U there. It's where your Z axis will go. This is where your Y axis will go, and this is where your X axis will go. Notice I said you should ignore that. It's written that way across all of that like that. You see here as well says U, But in some other RAMPS 1.4, it says Z. Let me see if I can find that one that does. So you see that on the other side, you actually have the Z there. So you have that Z axis. So you just do basically the same thing for the Y, you do the same thing for the X, and then the extruders will go in these two slots. We'll get to extruders later, but that's pretty much everything. Now, one last thing you also want to pay attention to are these clips over here. So you see these particular things that you see on this side, they are called jumpers, right? Jumpers. You'll notice that there are 3 jumpers on this particular place. Now look at this particular place that doesn't have the jumper. So if you look at this particular one now, it has 3 jumpers that they didn't put into it. You see these 3 jumpers, right? You see that in the rest of them, we have jumpers. The reason we don't have jumpers here is because this one is intended to use only 1 extruder. But if you were using 2 extruders, you'd have seen that they would put jumpers here. So the question now is, what do these jumpers do? Well, the jumpers help you to fine-tune your stepper motor's steps, right? If you have all these 3 plugged in, you have the smoothest motion for your 3D printer. So you notice that that time when we were plugging the Z-axis, you can see that the Z-axis was moving smoothly, right? The reason it's moving smoothly like that is because we have these jumpers there. If we don't have those jumpers there like we have here, it will be moving in increments. It can move like 4 steps, like in steps of 8, in steps of 4, it depends. So if you have all these 3, you have your smoothest motion. And you want to have all these 3 stuck in to these places. Otherwise, your 3D printer will not have smooth motion, and that will affect whatever model you're trying to build because it's not going to move effectively. So that's pretty much it. And once you're done, you wire it up like this, you hook it up. And then once you hook it up like this, the only other thing you want to do is to then connect your stepper motor cables to these slots. You see that the X-axis cable goes all the way into the X-axis slot right there. The Y-axis cable goes all the way into the Y-axis slot. I don't know if you can see it right there. So that the Y-axis slot is the one next to it. That's the Y-axis slot. Right, so that's the Y-axis slot. This guy right here, this one with my hand. And then you have the Z-axis slot. So Y cable, that is the cable that's coming from this motor, goes all the way into whatever axis you present for it to be on. So now the next thing that is left is just to take the cable for this particular motor now, and then you stick it here. So since this motor belongs to the X-axis, you take that cable that comes out from here, you take the end of that cable, and then you stick it into where it says X here. You take the one for the Y-axis, you stick it in where it says Y, and then you take the 2 cables that go to the Z-axis, and then you stick it into the Z-axis. For the extruder motor, you plug your extruder motor right here, right? If your extruder is using 2 different stepper motors, you plug those 2 different stepper motors on there, and then you have your connection. Now, for this particular screen, you connect this screen to this particular slot. This slot, and then this slot. So you plug it in together like that. And then you have your electronic connection done like we have in this jumbled mess of wires, right? So in this video, I tried to show you how those connections are done. Don't forget the direction we said you should plug it. Don't plug it any other way. Otherwise, something is going to go wrong. And we don't want that to happen to you. I'm sorry, my setup is pretty rugged. I'm just trying to take you along as I continue my build so you can see what we have. So now once you have this all wired up like you do, then it's time to connect it to the Arduino Mega 2560. And the way you connect it is very simple. Find the pins as it matches with this. So you can see that these pins over here, right, they match line for line with the pins over here. So all you just need to do is carry this guy and then stick it on the 2560 like so, right? And then it just goes in like that. Watch out for the pins of your ramps. Make sure that the pins actually go inside effectively. So for things like this, if you have any pins like yours that is bent like this, just straighten it with your hand. Be careful not to damage anything, and then look through everything. Make sure you have all the pins straight. If there's anyone looking crooked, use your hand to straighten it. Nothing's going to happen. The world is not going to crash because of that. So just come here and then make sure it lines up pin for pin. And once you have it all hooked up like this, we're now ready to connect this guy to the computer. And how you connect it to the computer, you find the cable. Most likely when you buy this, it comes with a cable. Cable mostly looks like this, always very short. I don't know why. It can be longer. And then you take that end of the cable, you connect it to the Arduino, right? So the RAMPS doesn't have any connection to the computer. That's why you need the Arduino 2560 Mega. This is the 2560 Mega that connects to your computer. But the 2560 Mega is where you hook the RAMPS onto, and then the RAMPS 1.4 works directly with Marlin. So Marlin will use all the connections that you have on your RAMPS 1.4, and Marlin on Arduino does the connection to your computer, and then it begins to work. Like I said, this is not the video where you do that, but I just want to show you how we hooked it up and then you make it work. In some other videos, I'll show you how to connect the wires and all of that. This is just me showing you how these motors are working. There's still so many other things to cover, so we'll have to go on with those ones. And then when we get to proper videos for this, we'll still see another video in this series later. It's just, I wanted you to see that once you have your axes all set up, like we said, you then hook it up to a way like this, and then we continue. So the next videos will cover things like the heated bed, the hot end, and so many other things like that. Until then, I want you to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, turn on the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Take care.